The great chamber of the Kiroth High Council was once a place of light and beauty. Its walls had been carved from crystal that glowed with gentle colors, and its high ceiling once sparkled with threads of silver light. The Kiroth had built it to reflect peace, wisdom, and their long years of unity. But now that chamber was filled with shadows, and its beauty had been scarred by cracks and scorch marks from desperate battles. Counselor Jen stood at the center of the chamber, his hands trembling as he looked around at the other leaders. Their proud robes were torn, stained with soot and dust. Their faces, once calm and wise, now carried only fear and exhaustion. Outside, the sky of their capital world was still dark with smoke. Fires burned where once gardens had bloomed. The enemy had come again. The Zirath Armada. For weeks, the Kiroth worlds had fallen one by one. Colonies destroyed, cities burned, fleets shattered. No one could stand against the Zirath. They were endless, merciless, like a tide that drowned all hope. The Kiroth had begged for help from the other great civilizations of the galaxy. But the responses had all been the same: cold silence. "The Trade Guild will not interfere," one counselor muttered bitterly. "They said protecting our people would not bring them profit." "The Union of Stars has sealed their borders," another growled. "They told us to surrender, to give the Zirath what they want." A third spat the words like poison. "And the core worlds? They pretend we do not exist. They speak of law and order, yet they watch our people burn." Murmurs of despair filled the chamber. Every counselor knew the truth. They were alone. Counselor Jen closed his eyes for a long moment. He could still hear the cries of his people in the streets. He could still see the faces of children clinging to their parents as the city shook under bombardment. He could still feel the weight of hopelessness pressing down on his heart. And yet, there was one thought he could not silence. One last hope. One last name. "There is one world left," Jen whispered. His voice was soft, but it silenced the chamber. "One people who have not yet turned their backs." The other counselors stared at him, their eyes wide with disbelief. "No," Minister Kyle said sharply. "You cannot mean them." "Not that world." Jen met his gaze. "Earth." A ripple of fear spread across the chamber. The Death World. Even the word itself made some shiver. Everyone in the galaxy knew of Earth, though few had ever dared to go there. It was a planet cursed with endless storms, violent seas, quakes, fires, and beasts so deadly that no other species could survive. Yet somehow, against all odds, the humans had thrived there. The stories of humanity were wild and frightening. They were said to be reckless, stubborn, and dangerous. They fought among themselves for centuries, yet they survived everything their world threw at them: disease, hunger, war, even winters that froze entire continents. Where other species would have perished, humans endured. "They are not allies," one counselor whispered. "They are predators." "They are not part of our unions or guilds," another said. "They have always stood apart. They will not come. And if they do," Minister Kale hissed, "they may be worse than the Zirath." "Do you wish to trade one nightmare for another?" Jen's voice shook, but his eyes burned with desperate fire. "Do we truly have a choice? Look around you. Listen to the silence of those who call themselves our friends. No one will help us. No one except perhaps them." The chamber grew quiet. Every counselor felt the truth of those words. Pride had already been stripped from them. Their fleets were broken. Their people starved. Their enemies grew stronger by the hour. Finally, the eldest of the council spoke, his voice weary. "The Deathworlders are a gamble, a dangerous one. But perhaps danger is all that can fight danger." Jen bowed his head. "Then we must try. If there is even a chance they will hear us, we must call." That night, in the deepest chamber of their communications tower, the Kiroth sent a signal. It was simple, desperate, and raw, a plea carried on the ancient frequencies that humans still used because no one else had ever listened. The message spoke of burning worlds, of children with no future, of a people who were about to vanish forever. And then it ended with only 3 words carried into the endless dark between the stars. "We need help." For many days, the Kiroth waited. No reply came. Their worlds continued to fall. Their enemies pressed closer. Many began to whisper that the humans had ignored them, as everyone else had. But Jen still watched the stars each night, whispering a prayer that someone, somewhere, had heard, and far beyond the borders of the known galaxy, on a storm-racked blue world no one dared to visit. The Deathworlders listened. For many days the Kiroth waited. Their message had gone out into the void, carrying all their desperation and fear. Yet the stars remained silent. Each passing hour broke their hope a little more. Some counselors began to mock Jen in whispers, saying he had wasted their last chance. Others said it was madness to ask help from Deathworlders at all, but Jen refused to give up. Each night he went to the high observatory, staring into the black sky, whispering his quiet prayer. Please, let someone hear. Then one morning the sky changed. It began as a shimmer on the edge of the system, a ripple of light in the dark. At first the Kiroth thought it was another enemy fleet arriving. Alarms rang across the capital. Families rushed into shelters, terrified that the Zirath had come at last to crush their homeworld. But when the ships emerged from the void, they were not Zirath, they were human. The first warship appeared like a mountain of steel, scarred and battered but unbroken. Its black hull was marked with strange human symbols, its weapons bristling like thorns. Then another followed, and another, dozens of them heavy, blunt, and powerful. Unlike the elegant designs of Kiroth ships, human vessels were ugly, brutal, and built for only one purpose: war. Gasps spread across the council chamber as the images came through the observatory screens. The humans had come, they answered, Jen whispered. His throat tightened with emotion. They actually answered. A communication channel opened. The image flickered, and a human face appeared on the great screen. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark uniform with silver insignia across the chest. His skin was scarred, his jaw strong, and his eyes burned like cold fire. They were not the eyes of a politician or a merchant. They were the eyes of someone who had seen battle again and again and had walked through it still standing. The human spoke, his voice deep and steady. We received your signal. This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are here. For a long moment, the Kiroth chamber was silent. No one knew how to respond. Finally, Counselor Jen stepped forward and bowed his head low. We did not think you would come, Jen said, his voice shaking with relief. The human commander leaned closer to the screen. His words were simple, yet they carried more weight than any speech from the core worlds. You called, he said. That is enough. Across the capital, Kiroth citizens watched the human fleet descend from orbit. The ships moved like iron giants spreading across the sky, their shadows covering the land. People gathered in the streets, staring upward in awe and fear. Some wept openly. Others whispered prayers. When the first human landing craft touched down, soldiers stepped out in formation. They were armored in dark suits, helmets covering their faces, weapons held across their chests. They moved with precision, each step sharp and measured. To the frightened eyes of the Kiroth, they looked like machines of war, merciless, unstoppable. Children hid behind their parents. Elders shook their heads in worry. We have invited monsters, one woman whispered. But the humans did not attack. They did not raise their weapons. Instead, they began to unload supplies, crates of food, medicine, and tools. They set up shelters for the displaced. They brought water to the thirsty, bandaged the wounded, and carried the weak on their shoulders. One young Kiroth boy, his fur matted with dust, clung to his mother as he watched a towering human soldier kneel in front of him. The soldier removed his helmet, revealing a tired but kind face. He handed the boy a ration pack and smiled softly. The boy blinked in surprise. You are not monsters?" he asked in a trembling voice. The soldier chuckled gently. "No, kid. Just people." The words spread like fire. Slowly, the fear in the Kiroth hearts began to fade. The humans were not here to conquer. They were here to stand with them. Still, doubt remained in the council chamber. Minister Kale spoke in anger. "Do not be fooled. They will help us now, yes. But once the war is over, they will demand our worlds as payment. They will rule us through fear." Counselor Jen stood tall, his voice firm for the first time in weeks. "And what would you have us do, Kale? Surrender to the Zirath and watch our people die? The humans are here when no one else came. That alone means something." The chamber grew silent again. Even those who distrusted the Deathworlders could not deny the truth. Outside, in the burning streets of the Kiroth capital, a new sight could be seen. Human soldiers and Kiroth workers standing side by side, repairing walls, distributing supplies, watching the skies together. The people who had once feared them now looked at them with cautious hope. And high above, the human fleet held its position like steel guardians waiting for the storm to come. Because everyone knew, the Zirath would not ignore this. They would come again. And when they did, the humans would be waiting. The human fleet hung in orbit like a wall of steel, a silent promise of protection. To many Kiroth, it was a sight of comfort. For the first time in months, the skies above their homeworld were not filled with enemy fire. Instead, they were guarded by ships that seemed unbreakable. But in the great chamber of the High Council, fear still lingered. Minister Kale slammed his fist against the table. "We cannot trust them." "Do you not see what we have done? We have invited predators into our house." Several counselors nodded nervously. Their minds swam with the old stories, the tales of humanity that had drifted across the stars for centuries. Stories of wars that had turned continents into ash, of machines of fire that could burn entire skies, of a species that fought not only enemies but themselves and still survived. "They are dangerous," one counselor whispered. "More dangerous than the Zirath, perhaps." "And yet," Counselor Jen replied quietly, "they came when no one else did." The chamber fell silent. Jen's words carried a truth no one could deny. Every other great power of the galaxy had abandoned them. The humans alone had answered. Still, fear is not so easily silenced. When the first human squads marched through the streets, armored and armed, many Kiroth shrank away. To them, the humans looked like walking war machines. Tall, broad, and cold, their helmets hiding their faces. Children clung to their parents. Merchants closed their doors. Whispers followed the humans wherever they went. "Savages," someone muttered, "beasts in skin. They will turn on us." Yet the humans gave no sign of aggression. They set up defensive positions around the city. They repaired shield generators and built barricades. At night, they patrolled the streets, their heavy boots echoing through the silence. It was during one of those nights that a small moment began to change everything. A Kiroth child, no older than 7, wandered too close to the edge of a broken plaza where the ground had caved in from bombardment. His mother screamed as the child slipped, but before disaster struck, a human soldier rushed forward. With one powerful arm, he caught the child and lifted him to safety. The boy stared up at the soldier, his eyes wide. Slowly, the soldier removed his helmet. His face was tired, scarred, but gentle. He knelt down and spoke softly. "You're safe now." The boy blinked. You're not a monster?" The soldier gave a small smile. "No, just human." The boy laughed nervously, and the sound carried across the plaza. Onlookers whispered to each other. The humans were not what they had believed. Word spread quickly. Kiroth families began to speak of moments when humans had shown kindness. A soldier carrying an old elder to a shelter when he could not walk. A medic who worked for hours to save a wounded Kiroth child. Marines who shared their food rations with the hungry. The walls of fear began to crack. But inside the council, Minister Kael refused to yield. "Do not let these small acts blind you," he warned. "Humans are predators. It is in their nature. They help us now only to gain our trust. When this war is over, they will demand everything." Counselor Jen stood tall. "Perhaps they are predators. Perhaps their world made them strong in ways we cannot imagine. But tell me, Kyle, what do you call those who abandon us? Friends? Allies? No, they are cowards. And if predators are the only ones who will stand with us, then I say let the predators come." His words rang across the chamber. For the first time in weeks, counselors lifted their heads with something close to pride. Meanwhile, on the battlefield edges of the Kiroth system, human ships began to test their strength against the Zirath. Small skirmishes erupted in the outer reaches of space. Where Kiroth fleets had crumbled, the humans stood like stone. Their ships absorbed fire that would have torn others apart. They struck back with weapons that lit up the void with thunder. The Zirath, who had expected an easy conquest, began to feel resistance. In the city streets, more Kiroth watched the humans with cautious curiosity. Some still whispered fears, but others whispered something new: hope. One night, an old Kiroth artisan stood in front of a group of human soldiers who had helped rebuild part of his workshop. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at them. "Our own brothers abandoned us," he said. "But you came. You bleed for us. Why?" The human sergeant, helmet under his arm, simply replied, "Because you asked." The artisan bowed deeply, the gesture of highest respect in Kiroth culture. For the first time, the humans were no longer seen as monsters but as allies. Yet even as bonds grew, the shadow of the Zirath loomed larger. Their fleets gathered, preparing for a strike that would test both Kiroth and humans to their core. And when that day came, the Kiroth would see the full truth of what it meant to fight beside Deathworlders. The silence of waiting was broken by fire. Scouts reported that the Zirath armada had entered the system. Not a raiding party, not a probing fleet. A full strike force, larger than anything the Kiroth had faced before. Their ships blotted out the stars, a tide of steel and flame that spread across the void like a storm. Fear swept through the capital. Families clung to each other. The council chamber shook with panic. Even the strongest Kiroth soldiers felt their courage slipping away. The Zirath were death-given form, but on the orbiting command ship Resolute, Admiral Hayes did not tremble. The human commander stood before the glowing display of the star map, watching as enemy signals multiplied. Around him, his officers moved quickly, preparing for battle. Their voices were steady, their faces calm. These were soldiers who had lived with war all their lives. He opened a channel to the Kiroth Council. The enemy has arrived. We will engage them. Counselor Jen's voice shook. Can you hold them, Admiral? Can even your fleet withstand such numbers? Hayes's eyes were cold fire. We will not retreat. We will not surrender. As long as one of our ships still burns, the Zirath will not have this world. The word spread across the city as the human fleet moved to intercept. To the Kiroth, who had known only despair, those words lit a spark inside them. When the first shots were fired, the void lit up like a new sun. Zirath warships poured plasma fire across the human line. Shields flared and broke. Hulls groaned under the weight of the attack. But the human ships did not scatter. They held formation, trading blow for blow. Their cannons roared with thunder, sending missiles and beams that tore through enemy armor. On the surface, Kiroth citizens looked up in awe. The battle was not graceful. It was brutal. The humans fought like wolves, tearing chunks from the enemy even as they bled themselves. Then came the ground assault. Zirath troop carriers pierced the atmosphere, raining down like fireballs. They struck cities and fields, unleashing waves of monstrous soldiers. The Kiroth defenders faltered. Many were too weary, too broken by past defeats. The Zirath pushed forward like an unstoppable tide, but at the gates of the capital the humans stood waiting. Lines of armored marines took position behind barricades, their heavy weapons locked on the skies. When the first Zirath beasts roared forward, the humans unleashed a storm of fire. Explosions shook the ground. Energy bolts cut through the air. The Zirath charge broke against the human line like waves against rock. For 3 days the battle raged. The skies never cleared of smoke. Streets became rivers of rubble and blood. Kiroth soldiers fought beside humans, learning quickly from their allies. Where the Kiroth hesitated, humans pushed forward. Where Kiroth shields broke, human armor held. Where Kiroth hearts faltered, human voices shouted words of strength. Hold the line. Stand together. No one falls today. One Kiroth soldier, young and trembling, found himself shoulder to shoulder with a human marine twice his size. The human handed him extra ammunition and grinned under his scarred face. Don't worry, kid. Just aim where they're ugliest. The Kiroth laughed despite his fear. Together they fought. Stories began to spread even as the battle raged. A squad of 12 humans holding a city gate for 72 hours without sleep. Their weapons burning red from constant fire. A human medic who dragged both Kiroth and human wounded through a battlefield, refusing to leave anyone behind. A lone human pilot who rammed his crippled fighter into a Zirath carrier, breaking its spine. The Kiroth had never seen such fury. Counselor Jen watched from the command balcony as the humans held the capital walls. His heart shook at the sight. They did not fight as if they feared death. They fought as if death itself feared them. At the end of the 3rd day, the Zirath forces pulled back. Their first wave had been shattered. Their ships retreated to regroup, leaving smoking wreckage across the plains. The city still stood. The Kiroth gathered in the streets, staring at the battered but unbroken human soldiers. Many wept openly. For the first time in months they had seen the impossible. The Zirath had been stopped. In the council chamber, Minister Kyle spoke in disbelief. They truly held. Jen's voice was thick with emotion. Yes, the Deathworlders stood when no one else would, and because of them, we still breathe. But even as relief spread, Admiral Hayes's voice came over the comms. This was only the beginning. The Zirath will return stronger and angrier. They will not stop. His words were grim, but in them was also iron. And neither will we. The first great battle was over. The war for survival had truly begun. The city still smoked from the first battle. Towers of crystal lay in ruins, and the skies carried the smell of ash. Families searched through rubble for lost loved ones, while soldiers dragged the wounded to makeshift shelters. The Kiroth were alive, but they were not celebrating. They knew the Zirath would return. In the human command ship Resolute, Admiral Hayes and his officers studied glowing maps of the system. The Zirath fleet was vast, far larger than anything Earth had ever faced. Numbers alone promised doom, yet Hayes was calm. They are strong, one Kiroth officer admitted, standing beside the humans. Stronger than any enemy we have seen. How can you hope to fight them when even our greatest fleets were destroyed? Hayes did not look away from the star map. Strength alone does not win wars. Understanding does. The Kiroth did not fully grasp his meaning. To them, war was about size, weapons, and numbers. But the humans thought differently. They were not only fighters, they were problem solvers. And the Zirath, for all their power, had weaknesses. Over the next weeks, the humans watched closely. Every battle, every skirmish, every encounter taught them something new. They studied how Zirath ships moved, how their armies advanced, how their supply lines stretched. Patterns began to form. Flaws began to show. Where others saw an unstoppable tide, the humans saw a puzzle. When the Zirath launched their next assault, they expected another clash of fleets. Instead, they found human ships striking deep at their supply convoys. Fuel depots burned. Ammunition transports vanished into the void. Communications went silent. On the ground, Zirath war beasts thundered into cities, only to stumble into traps laid by human marines. Explosives hidden beneath streets. Barricades that funneled them into narrow alleys. Snipers waiting high above. The Kiroth watched in awe as the humans adapted. Every loss only made them sharper. Every wound made them stronger. They fight like no one else, a young Kiroth soldier whispered after watching a squad of humans turn an ambush into a victory. The enemy tries to break them, but they only grow more dangerous. In one battle, human engineers hacked into a Zirath control system and turned their own drones against them. The skies filled with fire as the machines tore into their former masters. In another, a small human strike team slipped behind enemy lines, planting charges that destroyed an entire shipyard. The explosion lit up the void, sending shockwaves of panic through the Zirath fleet. The Kiroth could hardly believe it. For the first time, the enemy was not advancing. They were stumbling. Still, fear remained in the council chamber. Minister Kale spoke again, his voice sharp. Yes, they fight well. Yes, they bring victories. But do you not see? They are too effective, too relentless. What will they do when the Zirath are gone? What if their eyes turn to us? Counselor Jen shook his head. You speak only of fear, Kale. I have walked among them. I have seen their soldiers share their food with our hungry. I have seen them carry our wounded when they were wounded themselves. They are not fighting for conquest. They are fighting because we asked. The chamber grew quiet. Meanwhile, in the streets of the capital, the bond between humans and Kiroth grew stronger. Children no longer hid from the soldiers in black armor. They followed them, offering water or flowers. Kiroth workers sang songs of gratitude as human engineers rebuilt power lines and shield grids. Even the most doubtful began to whisper it. Hope. One evening, as the twin moons of the Kiroth homeworld rose over the battered city, Admiral Hayes addressed both his people and the Kiroth Council. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of fire and iron. You see endless enemies, he said. You see numbers beyond counting, fleets without end. But we see something else. We see a problem that can be solved. We see an enemy that bleeds, that can break, that can fall. Do not look at their strength. Look at their weaknesses. And believe, because we do. His words echoed across the city, carried on every screen and speaker. Kiroth families gathered to listen. Soldiers lifted their heads with new courage. The Zirath had brought only despair. But the Deathworlders brought something greater than weapons. They brought conviction, and with that conviction the impossible no longer seemed impossible. That night, human and Kiroth fleets launched a joint counterattack. Side by side, they struck a Zirath outpost that had supplied half the enemy armada. The battle was fierce, but the humans led the way with cunning strikes and relentless fire. When the dust cleared, the outpost was gone, reduced to ash. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. For the first time, the Zirath had lost more than a skirmish. They had lost ground. In the council chamber, Jen whispered words he had not dared to speak in months. This is not just survival. This is the beginning of victory. And in the hearts of the Kiroth, the truth settled like a flame that would not die. The Deathworlders had come, and with them, hope had returned. The galaxy held its breath. The Zirath had been wounded, their supply lines broken, their pride struck. But a wounded predator is still deadly. Now the enemy gathered its full might. From across the stars, their fleets converged on the Kiroth homeworld. It was a storm of fire and steel, larger than anything the humans or Kiroth had ever seen. The Kiroth Council trembled at the sight of the endless swarm of ships on the star maps. "There are too many," whispered one minister. "No world can survive this." But Admiral Hayes did not flinch. His eyes were cold, his voice steady. "Then we do what Deathworlders always do. We stand, we fight, and we do not break." The Kiroth looked at the humans around them. Tired soldiers, scarred engineers, medics with bandaged hands, yet none showed fear. They prepared as if survival was not just possible, but certain. That belief spread like fire through the halls, out into the streets, into every heart. For the first time, the Kiroth believed too. The skies burned when the Zirath arrived. Wave after wave of warships poured into orbit, their guns firing without mercy. Shields cracked, cities shook, and the very air seemed to scream. But the humans were ready. From hidden bunkers, long-range cannons roared. From deep space, fleets of human ships emerged, using every trick, every trap, every sacrifice they had prepared. Mines drifted into enemy paths. Drones swarmed in confused targeting systems. Human fighters dove into impossible angles, drawing fire away from Kiroth defenses. On the ground, human marines and Kiroth soldiers stood side by side. The Zirath unleashed their beasts, towering monsters of claw and scale, but the defenders did not run. They fought in the streets, in the alleys, on the rooftops. Snipers struck from shadows. Explosives shattered war beasts before they reached the walls. Every block became a battlefield. "Every soldier a wall. Hold the line," a human sergeant roared, dragging a wounded Kiroth to safety. "No one falls today." The battle raged for hours, then days. The Zirath kept coming, an endless tide of ships and soldiers. But for every wave, the humans found a way to strike back. Admiral Hayes knew they could not win by defense alone. So he gambled everything on a single plan. In secret, engineers had prepared a massive weapon, a chain reaction hidden in the very asteroid belt of the system. If triggered at the right moment, it would unleash a storm of debris and fire, crushing the heart of the Zirath fleet. But to activate it, someone had to fly into the belt and set it off manually. A mission with no return. When Hayes explained the plan, silence filled the room. Then one human captain stood. "We'll do it. Earth taught us one thing: better to fall standing than to live kneeling." The Kiroth were stunned. "You would give your lives for us?" The captain only smiled. "That's what allies do." The final act began. As the Zirath pressed harder, the chosen human ships dove into the asteroid belt, pursued by enemy fighters. The battle outside grew worse, but the defenders held on, buying every second with blood and steel. In the belt, the human captains gave their last messages. Some spoke of families back home, some of Earth's oceans and skies, some of the new friends they had made among the Kiroth. Then, with steady hands, they activated the charges. The stars lit with fury. Asteroids shattered into a storm of fire, tearing through the Zirath fleet. Entire warships vanished in seconds, ripped apart by the chain reaction. The invincible armada staggered, broken, bleeding. Admiral Hayes gave the order. "Now, strike with everything!" The humans and Kiroth surged together. Ships poured fire into the crippled fleet. Fighters hunted the scattered survivors. On the ground, the enemy lost coordination, and the defenders drove them back street by street. For the first time, the Zirath retreated. The unbreakable had been broken. When silence finally returned, the skies were clear. The Kiroth cities stood scarred but alive, and across the galaxy the message spread like wildfire. The Zirath could be defeated. On the steps of the council hall, Kiroth and humans stood together as the people cheered. Minister Kale, once full of doubt, bowed his head before the human soldiers. "I was wrong," he admitted. "You did not come for conquest. You came when we called. You came because it was right." Admiral Hayes only answered with a tired smile. "That's what it means to be human." The Kiroth would never forget the sight of Deathworlders, scarred, weary, but unbroken, standing in their streets. They had brought more than weapons. They had brought courage, hope, and a future. And in every corner of the galaxy, species whispered the same words. When the Deathworlders arrive, despair does not last.